political aims are more important than the profit. Ideology is a driving force in the world. It's not just about money.
Oh, Simon dropped at the worst time. But yeah, I agree with you. Another example of that is Gary Lineker. Gary Lineker in the UK is like a huge draw. And he was fired solely because of the control of the Jewish supremacy and the Zionist lobby.
Yep. Phil Donahue, too. Oberman's another one. Like, they will get rid of journalists who are pulling in and carrying their weight because it doesn't go with the Zionist narrative.
Sully, I'm seeing it's reported that 3 members of the Iranian Navy were killed in this latest Israeli strike on Bandar Abbas port. I sent it to you in the DM.
I appreciate that, Daniel. I'll double check it. Ryan, a question to you. Going forward, we hope the US-Iran situation has subsided. What happens now? Because Israel's saying that they're going to start attacking Iran in a lot more ferocious manner in the next couple of days. Iran obviously have already said that they're going to continue attacking Israel. What do you foresee in the next day or two or the next week?
You know, Larry Johnson wrote about this. The F-35s need about 30 hours of downtime for every hour of flight time. And so that cycle's about to come. So Israel probably is going to have another round where they can hit them really hard with all the jets America gave them. But then those will be down again for maintenance. And so if Iran can just stomach that and then they can bounce back again, they are doing a lot of damage to Israel. I mean, they're fleeing to Cyprus. They're taking damage in Haifa and Tel Aviv. They would be taking a lot of economic damage. It's just America bails them out. They would be running out of interceptors, but America bails them out. And a lot more missiles would be hitting, but America is helping shoot them down. Like, Iran is not fighting Israel. Iran is fighting Israel with America's shield. And then even America attacked Iran. Just like, oh, yeah, boom, we'll hit this. It's just not a fair fight. It sucks. But Iran has a way to pull out a victory just by not losing. And, you know, and they've got some cards for their own Samson option where they could either hit the oil fields in Saudi Arabia or close the strait, which would force all of Asia to come in and negotiate a peace. So they have a way out. If they start to lose, they can just do that. Israel has a Samson option too. They have hundreds of nuclear weapons, so you can't pound on them too hard or they'll nuke you. And I swear to God, they could get away with it. I mean, they basically nuked Gaza. They killed all those people and nothing happened, no consequences. They're still killing them. I brought that up today. It was like, I know everyone's focused on Iran. I understand why, but starving Gazans are trying to get food and Israelis are just machine gunning civilians for fun. They're fucking terrorists. And the U.S. hasn't said a word about it. Like, oh, hey, did you just shoot a bunch of people trying to get food at the aid again?
Ryan, did you see the testimony of that Jewish American doctor who stated that young kids have been shot at close range in the chest?
Yeah, I've seen the x-rays in their skulls, too. They're playing games for headshots and stuff. And this is on film. Like, Dan was talking about it, I guess, yesterday or 2 days ago. It's all blurred because it was staying up for so long. But remember the flour massacre or the World Food Court that got bombed, or the ambulances that they just pulled over on film and shot the medics and stuff at the side of the road, lights on and everything. It's on fucking film. It's just like a pure execution and nothing. Like, it was reported, it wasn't on cable network, but it was all over social media. Doesn't matter. Israel can do anything it wants. Things that even America couldn't get away with. Like when America did Abu Ghraib, everyone was pissed off about it and people went to prison for it. But when Israel rapes prisoners, they're celebrated like celebrities.
Yeah, that's same with UK actually. That was the one time in history Piers Morgan was on the right side. He's the one who exposed it in the UK. But then they made him lose his job.
So Trump
hey, there's another example.
About
Pierce lost his job because he told the truth. It's not about money all the time. It's about power. It's about loyalty to power.
Simon, I'll let you jump in here because I know you kind of been countering your point quite a bit there.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely. I mean, money is normally a measure of power. There's power achieved through other ways, but in general, in analyzing power dynamics, ideology is very powerful when it's combined with money and power. But the average ideology, if you have no money and power, is just not. It doesn't. I don't think it tends to come into the equation. So you got to, when analyzing power dynamics, I think money is a good measure of power, but there is definitely ideologies and power that when you combine all three together, it's obviously the most.
No, you want money and power to further your ideology.
But it tends to, when you're dealing with, again, it depends. So there's sovereign countries which act differently to, for example, when you're dealing with America, Europe, most of the power is consolidated in corporations. And so those corporations, as they're public, even if you have a radical ideology of one of the board members, it tends to have a governance structure where your ideology can't govern everything. So, you know, just because I used to work in investment banking,
power is in the government. Look at COVID; they can shut all those corporations down,
absolutely,
just like that.
There's no, I mean, government is subordinate in the West because they've got lobby power, securitization, financialization. I mean, the government just works for corporate interest. You know, I used to work in investment banking, so I all day in, day out, I see how these people act, how they govern, the parameters.
Yeah, but the state can do things that no corporation can do. The state can kill you. The state can take your money without any agreement. The state can completely determine what they do with your money. I mean, the state is the enemy, and if it weren't for the state, we wouldn't be seeing these kinds of criminal activities on the part of Israel, United States, etc.
The corporations lobby the state, hoping to get favoritism from the state. And the state can enforce antitrust laws on you. The state can enforce lawsuits on you. The state can just put a mandate on you and force you to shut your business down or not allow you to travel or whatever, like they did during COVID. Like, people lost a lot of money and they had to pay out trillions in COVID bucks and stuff. It was not in economic interest of anyone, but it was in the ideological interest.
But Ryan, for big pharma though, a company like Pfizer, they're willing to pay those multi-billion-dollar fines if they're going to make $100 billion selling a bioweapons vaccine that makes them a tremendous amount of profit. So they do the cost benefit.
Yeah, but look at all the other
willing to take the
corporations
risk.
that lost money from that.
Just some more
Well,
breaking news, and then I'll give it straight back to you guys because I think it's a good discussion. Just give me 2 seconds. One is obviously Iranians take to the streets of Tehran in celebration of Iran's strike on America's Al Udeid airbase, and then we've got a statement from none other than Donald Trump, President Trump, and here's his statement. He's actually thanking Iran. He's wrote, "Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected and have very effectively countered. There have been 14 missiles fired, 13 was knocked down, and 1 was set free because it was heading in a non-threatening direction. I am pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America."
It was a pump and dump.
Did you see that clout trade-off? Because Iran's going to be like, it was super successful. Trump's was not super successful at getting rid of nukes. And Iran wasn't super successful at hitting Qatar. They're both going to lie.
Right?
You're both talking. Let Ryan finish. Go ahead,
We're talking. You just always interrupt, dude. You have no impulse control. Trump lied to his base saying, we obliterated their nuclear program. That is not true. And Iran lies to its base saying it was successful attacking a Qatari base when nothing hit and no one died. But that is part of their ideology. And that's what I'm talking about. Each has to go to his own and lie to their prospective public. to maintain that support and save face. And it's 5 a.m., so I'm kicking out.
Appreciate
I've got
coming on,
some
Ryan, as
news.
always.
So
Thanks for coming.
yeah, oh, he's going out of the space. Sorry. See you, Ryan. Sorry. So Oman is the only country that hasn't condemned Iran and has actually shown some support.
Okay, I just
Awesome.
add that what Ryan just conceded and counters his previous point that Iran made a grave and huge mistake. It could cost them their state. Well, as it turns out, maybe he was orchestrated and it paid off because they got to save face. They maintain unity, and now they can focus on Israel. And Trump said he's not going to strike back. So he just completely contradicted his earlier point. He's gone now. He can't respond. Do you remember how he got all dramatic about how Iran made such a gross and violent mistake and it's going to cost them? Well, apparently not. They won out of this, even though it was probably a weak strike. I believe more than one missile struck them. The damage is worse than what Trump will concede. And that's fine. Let him play it down and pretend it's nothing special because he's not responding. Maybe that'll de-escalate and Iran won't strike any more bases and they can just focus on Israel. So for them, it's a win because they save face.
Trump just tweeted again. He says, "Congratulations, world. It's time for peace."
I think it's
That's
very
not-
interesting that he said, "Thank you for warning us in advance." That's not something that is normally conceded to. It's a very it's a very different type of statement. I don't think that normally happens.
I mean, it wasn't orchestrated?
The whole thing is very fake and gay, Simon.
It certainly is. It
Might
doesn't
I
sound
say.
like Trump.
On both sides, I'll say. I think your theory might be right, Simon. I'm starting to come along.
Guys, don't say that on the space. People think that Simon's like a propaganda piece, and I'm letting him say it. Truth, smash it
Propaganda
quickly.
for who? Who am I a propaganda for, though?
Okay, I mean, even
For the
Simon,
GCC.
Simon
For the
contradicted
GCC.
himself earlier. He said that Greater Israel is an American outpost. Okay, it's an American outpost. So can Americans go there and claim birthright and live there and get free healthcare and free education? Or is it actually a Jewish outpost which only allows Jews to go there, claim their free healthcare, free education? So at least we can agree to that part. And then when you mention there's corporations in charge, they're the ones who control America. Okay, I agree with you. So it's corporations that are then therefore controlling that American outpost. But hey, that American outpost is actually a Jewish outpost, which also means that the corporations are mainly run by Jews, which control America. So thank you for conceding all those points. Appreciate it.
Well,
Yeah,
we'll
it's
see how right
definitely-
Simon actually is. If Simon, pardon me, we'll see how right you actually are if what Trump said comes true and he's able to keep Israel on a leash, which I would
Trump-
bet against.
Well, Trump doesn't keep Israel on a leash. It's the Jews in charge, man. So it's the Jews that decide what the calls are.
Trump.
And for what it's worth, on the free market dictates everything. We could look at all the films put out by Disney over the last half decade, if not the entirety of the decade, that have actually bombed or absolutely bombed in the box office, and yet they keep pushing out their propaganda because at the end of the day, folks like BlackRock will continue pumping money in, make sure the company continues to do well, indifferent of the success or the audience feedback to the things that they're putting out. And it's because the mission is more important than the money, when the money will get redirected back to them regardless of the success of the films. And we could point to tons of other things that I think are part of this kind of more nefarious system, whether it's Amazon, things like Uber, all these companies that got endless funding for, in the case of Amazon, something like 15 years before they could turn a profit. But at the end of the day, their mission was not to be a successful financial enterprise. It was to essentially destroy what you would think of loosely as Main Street, with small and mid-sized businesses that were able to compete and have no opportunity to do so against Amazon. And if you think of, I mean, Simon, I know we agree that centralization is really, really dangerous, but everything's getting centralized under this system that's all funded by these same big money players that get to pick and choose the winners that they want to support. And at the end of the day, that's not really, not only is it not free market capitalism, it's essentially communism, because the people in control, the politicians control the biggest companies, control the money printers. So they get to determine where the money goes, where the success is, and even when things aren't successful, that they just to get to continue on, because again, the mission or the narrative or the propaganda is far more important to them than the dollars that they might make or might not make with their products, or at least that's my thought.
Yeah, so I see it more as I mean, it's got nothing to do with communism. That's the ability not to own private property, which I think is the opposite. This is a courtocracy.
But isn't that one and the same?
No.
If the means of production and the politicians at the top and the big money guys at the top get to decide the winners and losers, like that is the means of production.
No, I'd call that
It's
a
veiled
rigged.
communism.
Let's not go into definitions, because I mean I don't think it's communism. It's a courtocracy. It's crony capitalism, no doubt. And when you install a Western central bank, you get to direct the flow of money. And so the Federal Reserve, which is owned by the banks, means that you get to direct the flow of money for the banks. But over time, those banks have become public corporations. And when they become public companies, the control has moved over to some degree to the asset managers. And so it is the asset managers like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street that have ended up with the effective control, which means now if you own board seats and the most significant shareholding in over 20,000 corporations globally around the world, now you can do a portfolio approach. So if you want to sacrifice Disney in order to push out a narrative that supports an agenda that leads to, open borders or mass deportations or racial mixing or anything like that, you can now manage as a portfolio, because the military companies have effective access to the deep state, or you can privatize elements of the deep state, like surveillance through Palantir. Once you can privatize all those corporations and manage them as a portfolio, then you can optimize for war. And I think the Russia-Ukraine is a classic example of how you weaken Europe, you vassalize Ukraine, you get access to rare earth minerals for certain parts of the portfolio, you get to issue loans, you get to control over resources, you get to use your intelligence network, which most people think work for state interest when they work for corporate interest. You get contracts off the whole thing. Even ICE, that's the privatized prison sector. You get to create civil unrest. You get paid per deportation. You get paid per incarceration. And so you get to maximize your portfolio and manage these, over. The difference is that a state has to think long term. And a sovereign state like Russia, China, Saudi, Qatar, anyone that hasn't given control over to a Western central bank and actually is able to access their resources without privatizing their resources, they get to think long term and execute a long term strategy. Those that are on the public markets, they only get to execute a 3-month strategy because they get to manipulate markets, they get to use their hedge funds. And BlackRock can do a complete portfolio approach in order to maximize the algorithm. And now their technology is used by both the Fed and Treasury to manage fiscal and monetary policy, as well as every asset manager in the world. And so now you get to use all that data to actually control capital flows and maximize an algorithm that maximizes profit for the BlackRock portfolio, which in itself is a public company, and it gets an endless flow of capital through the Federal Reserve, through its banks and its portfolio, and through the creation of securitization and different financial.
But Simon,
products.
isn't at a global level, if we were to just not even go into the who they are, but if we were to suggest that, let's say I think Adam yesterday said there are 8,000 individuals that have more wealth than the 8 billion other people combined, right? If there's 8,000 people that loosely are at the top of BlackRock and these nation states that you're referring to, and they're all essentially working in some kind of cohesive fashion to build out some kind of not national strategy, but a global strategy, right? They're trying to move the pieces that all of us are merely a part of. How is that no different than a political entity that's also controlling capital, that also controls the media, that also controls the technology to build a slave state that extends far beyond all borders and merely extends across the entirety of the earth?
Well, that's exactly what it is. And they meet every, periodically at World Economic Forum. And the people and power changes all the time. The people that are sat around the table are different people, because when you make good moves, bad moves, maybe you turn against the wrong people, your wealth can be destroyed. And so power dynamics always change. There's competition in that structure as well. But they tend to meet in the World Economic Forum at Bilderberg meetings. They set the agenda. The Bank for International Settlements coordinates the monetary flows. And the idea behind a Western central banking system, the fractional reserve system, is to slowly transfer wealth away from the people over to a smaller and smaller hands. And eventually, with a
Which
global,
is like communism, right?
well, communism is when people can't actually, I think it's a different ideology. I think crony capitalism, using a Western, a central bank that it's almost like a self-imploding, like the people that believe in the communist ideology, which I don't believe in at all. But if they do, they believe that it's a long-term sustainable strategy for a country. But the debt-based Ponzi scheme is always designed to implode upon itself, and then you have capital outflows from one country, and then you move the host country to another country, just like they did from the British Empire to the American Empire, and now they're invested in a multipolar world. So you always change it, that's I think is a different ideology to communism, but the effect in terms of oppression is the same. And that's why if you read books like Tragedy and Hope, you invest in both communism and crony capitalism, and that was always the break. That was the Federal Reserve System with the Soviet Union, and you can invest in these different ideologies and manage it like a portfolio as well. But now you can do it on steroids through organizations like BlackRock, which always have. If you look at things like Carlyle Group, Palantir, they've always got CIA Mossad connections because there is the privatization of all these resources to the point where the government just works for these corporations. They don't work for the people, and there's no America first within the government. There's no European first. There's no UK first. It's just simply policies that are designed to steal money from the people, stop providing the resources that they need, and transfer it over to these corporate interests, which is what we're witnessing right now.
But you would concede that taking from everybody to continue perpetuating a machine
Ian,
from
wouldn't it be Jewish state first? It seems like America.
Well, that's where I was kind of going. I mean, what he's describing and taking from the people and self-perpetuating this machine that's just beneficial to the very teeny top of let's say elites. And not only does that ring true with Bolshevism and exactly what we saw rolled out in Russia, but I mean, for anybody that hasn't read Animal Farm by Orwell, it's essentially the same thing. And so Simon,
sorry, if you look at all the people that are at a Bilderberg meeting, which really is just a consolidation of those that sit at the top of this chain, you will find a disproportionate number of Jewish people. But I don't think they're using like a Torah type of ideology or a Talmudic ideology, because it's somewhat decentralized and power shifts. So if you act irrationally to the profit motive, you will risk falling a notch down the chain, because it ultimately, within those groups of private corporations and ultimate power there, the profit motive is what allows you to maintain your power at that top.
Yeah, but they're not interested in making profits because they control the means of production and the monetary policy. They can artificially print out as much cash as they want. That's why they don't care if corporations like Disney lose money on their movies. They're just going to artificially subsidize them anyway. Or like when some of these tech companies, they just fail, like Looped did, Sam Altman's first company. Yeah, it's okay. We'll just buy it out for more than what you spent, and then you can move on to your next project because you're just part of our systematic operation towards, controlling all the major interests, all the major corporations that you speak of in the hands of a few, which is absolutely the definition of communism. They do it through both crony capitalism that you mentioned and also through violence, because if you step up and you stand up to them, they will take you out like they did JFK, and any other politicians as well just secretly seem to disappear, or they get injected and suddenly have heart attacks. And, there's just say they're put out of commission. So it's another version of communism. It's just not all at once. You don't see like.
Has he cut out? Is it just me?
Truth cut out. Yeah. I agree with everything that was said, but I do think that the version of crony capitalism based upon a debt-based Ponzi scheme that you have in the West is different to a communist way of controlling. They're two different models that end up achieving, similar things.
Yes.
But
one is called corporate socialism, is what Anthony Anthony C. Sutton called it is corporate socialism. It's a corporate entity on top with the state in total union and actually existing socialism for everybody else is a corporate socialist model.
Yeah, they both have the same result, right? Which is everything is owned by a small group of people.
Yeah, they're two different mechanisms for achieving the same result, basically.
But the thing is, Simon, almost anything can be made profitable. So, for example, in dealing with like advertising, I've had people say, I'll criticize an ad and they'll say, well, that's just to make a profit. But they can make a profit in many different ways, depending on what story and what narrative they want to sell. They can make that particular thing profitable, that ideology profitable. I mean, they could basically make anything profitable. So the question is, why this in particular? Why Zionism? Why
Zionism?
The control?
Yeah, no, it's good.
Guys,
I mean,
can I give a
Zionism,
quick statement from Iran's government? This is from the Islamic Republic. It has humiliated America repeatedly. This is from Mr. Hashem al-Haidari. He speaks out about America's failure to subjugate the Islamic Republic despite sanctions, blockade, and various wars over 47 years. He praises Iran's steadfastness and dignity under the leadership of the Supreme Leader, who has maintained its independence and honor. This is from a speech at a mass gathering on 21/6/2025, an imminent victory. So it looks like it was a couple of days ago. But anyway, they're posting it now.
yeah, I mean, Zionism.
And we've got some more
was-
breaking news. Sorry, Simon, I'll give it straight back to you. And we've got some more breaking news. The tweets in the nest. One Iranian missile did hit US Al Ubaid air base in Qatar. There was some damage, but no casualties. So that tweet's in the nest. So there was one hit, despite the fact that they got, I believe, according to some sources, 12-hour notice. Go ahead, Simon.
Trump's letting him get away with that, Suleiman. Does that make America weak?
Yeah, to me, Zionism was just a very successful strategy to recruit an army to ethnically cleanse and eventually genocide the Palestinians, to disrupt the region, so that you can ensure that none of the countries in the region would ever be able to align around becoming a competing superpower. You create the petrodollar, you create profits for the military-industrial complex. There was a time when America wasn't energy independent, so it needed its resources. And Zionism was a very successful way of radicalizing Jewish people to engage in ethnic cleansing, radicalizing Christians to justify it through evangelical Christianity, and justifying crimes against humanity by demonizing Islam. So that was what essentially Zionism achieved, and now it has just become less useful because it's been exposed, and now it's been exposed, it's less effective at achieving its goal, and so Israel was committed to the Greater Israel Project, and now it looks like it failed because there was a resistance against the Greater Israel Project, which came from Iran. And now that strategic tension between Iran and Israel that was so profitable, it looks like to me that we're transitioning to a more profitable model, which is unity and invest in the region.
I agree with you, Simon, on like larger scale in terms of I feel like BRICS is where the future is and the Western Empire is on the decline. And I also agree that the 0.01% are abandoning the West completely and moving where the money is, and they have no nationality. Sorry, they have no nationalism. They have no patriotism. They don't care about their countries. And so when you ask why do our leaders make decisions that are bad for us and good for others, it's because there is no us. It's you. It's you versus them. It's us versus them. It's a class war. It's always a class war, in my opinion. So the cabal is 0.1% are rootless. They'll live anywhere. They'll abandon your country as soon as it's milk dry. And I agree that I think that's happening to America, to Europe.
Yeah, and Israel acts as a colony. It's a welfare state that's propped up by American taxpayer money. But what does it do very successfully? It creates a perfect narrative, which was really successful at radicalizing evangelical Christians. It was really successful at explaining why you should send billions, $300 billion over. And it was really profitable for not the American people, but the American